So the IFP finds itself at a bit of a crossroads this weekend following the death of its founder, Mangosuthu Buthelezi. The traditional Prime Minister of AmaZulu was laid to rest in KwaZulu-Natal yesterday. Now let's talk about the future then of its political home, the IFP, post-Buthelezi era, if you will. We're joined by journalist and author Jan Jan Joubert. Jan Jan, a very good evening to you. Good to speak to you as always. So how much of the IFP has essentially gone with the passing of Prince Buthelezi?
Good afternoon, and thank you for having me. I think, obviously, the IFP has never known a present or a situation without Buthelezi. So, therefore, contestation will happen and questions will be asked. What exactly happens to the IFP depends largely on the IFP. Does the IFP have the policies? Does it have the political will? Does it have the leadership? And does it have the organizational wherewithal to withstand the attacks that will come from within and from outside as parties try to usurp its support base?
And the IFP has been criticized, especially in around 2019 when Buthelezi was stepping down as its leader, but was then kept on as President Emeritus. During the elections, there was also a lot of talk about the fact that he was still on the party election regalia, even though it had a different leader. And some said that was because the party had no identity outside of its founder. Is that true still?
Well, we'll have to see, because quite frankly, we're in uncharted waters. Of course, since 2019, the leader has been Nkosi Hlabisa, and he has, by all accounts, done pretty well. I mean, I know he's very well respected. He is the choice, obviously, of the IFP, but also of the Freedom Front Plus to lead this country should the opposition pact gain more than 50% of the vote. So he has made good impressions, and now there will be a lot of pressure. Of course, in the end, when there were internal strife within the IFP, as there is in every political party, Buthelezi was the arbiter of those problems. Whenever push came to shove, Buthelezi decided what would happen, who would be in, who would be out. And that, of course, within the IFP, which is a large party with more than 550 councillors, more than 25 municipalities which it controls, with mayors, etc. It's a large party, and there was a group of insiders who were close to Buthelezi, and of course there was always a group of people who were not in Buthelezi's good books. So those people will now challenge. As we know, this will be mirrored in the Zulu royal family. We can already see in the royal household that there is contestation. You can be absolutely certain that both the IFP and its opponent, the ANC, will have its people in that battle and will try to influence the traditionalist hold which the royal household still has. The IFP has over the years enjoyed the lion's share of the more traditionalist support of the Zulu nation north of the Tugela River. It has regained it after losing it. And actually, the IFP at the moment, ever since Buthelezi stood down, has been on the up and up in by-elections. They have taken wards from the ANC in KwaZulu-Natal hand over fist, not only north of the Tugela, but also in unlikely places like Magabeni in the south of Durban, like areas of Pietermaritzburg, and even Harding in the deep south. So IFP all to play for, but they will be tempted. The ANC will tempt them with silver, with gold, with positions, and with patronage. And whether the IFP can withstand that depends on whether it believes that the differences between it and the ANC are differences of policy, or maybe just, as the ANC contends at the moment, cosmetic differences.
And they're already experiencing internal ructions as a result of the 2024 election run. You've got the national leadership that sat with the other opposition parties and agreed to be part of that pact. But the youth brigade is saying, well, hang on a minute, we're not on board with this. And in fact, some of them have gone as far as suggesting that they were not told the full story about what this would entail. You referenced, for instance, some of the parties in there, the Freedom Front Plus, suggesting, in fact, that Hlabisa may be the perfect candidate for president for the umbrella parties, the opposition pact that is. If things do go that way, what would it mean for the IFP standing in national politics? Would it finally be able to break the perception or even the reality that it really is more of a regional party with a large showing in KwaZulu-Natal, and what we've seen in recent years, quite a significant growth in areas such as Johannesburg and Gauteng?
Yes, well, basically in the Zulu-speaking areas of the country. So that would be parts of Gauteng, especially to the south of the province and to the west and the east, but not the north. And also parts of Mpumalanga, especially those bordering KZN. They've come very close to winning seats in the Mpumalanga legislature many times. And it is so that the IFP was founded as a Zulu cultural movement to start off with, when it was founded in 1975 as a reincarnation of the Inkatha Zulu movement, which King Solomon, the uncle of the late Prince, started in the 1920s against socialism. That was the first Inkatha. The second one started in 1975. And from 1990, the IFP, the Inkatha Freedom Party, contested in KwaZulu-Natal. And its support is not only a Zulu support. You can see, for instance, that by-election that it took off the ANC in Durban in the eThekwini Metro that I referred to, I think it was Ward 99. That's a ward where it actually put up an Indian candidate, and the area had one predominantly white VD, about 3 predominantly Indian VDs, and about 8 predominantly Zulu VDs, and the IFP carried it handsomely. So it is not just a Zulu cultural grouping, but it is very much a regional grouping. Its support amongst white people in KwaZulu-Natal, Indian people in KwaZulu-Natal, has always been there, and I think will increase the moves forward as the perception is that it is on the up and up, which it is if you look at the actual figures. Now, that is also why we see sudden talk of unification, and I think many in the IFP will say, beware of an ANC bearing gifts, lest it be a Trojan horse. I mean, the ANC has never been much interested in the welfare of the IFP, very much in its own, like all political parties. Insofar as the Youth Brigade is concerned, that issue has only just reared its head. So what happened was that the Youth Brigade wrote a letter to the IFP National Council, and that letter basically took issue with what used to be known as the Moonshot Pact and now no longer is, the Opposition Pact. And basically the National Council said, no, it stands by its previous decision. Now, this is very important. What was the decision? It's quite different from some of the other parties in that pact. The IFP Central Committee decided, National Council, not Central Committee, National Council of the IFP decided in January that it should work with, and I quote, like-minded parties on a case-by-case basis. Now, that is wide. And I think, therefore, the Youth Brigade, were it to take a look at that decision, would see that, yes, this pact falls within the scope of that decision, but it is not limited to the pact. So I think the IFP has a lot of room for maneuver, and I think it can play good power politics. If the ANC goes below 50 nationally, and the IFP beats the ANC in KwaZulu-Natal, it might even be that some sort of cooperation might be on the cards.
Jan Jan, let me get your thoughts then on one more thing. The death of Buthelezi, Prince Mangosuthu Buthelezi, in the last week has also brought back questions about his role, his involvement in the deadly violence, the black-on-black violence of the 90s. He's been called an apartheid collaborator. Now, some of the people who we are told committed some of the murders during that period are said to have been IFP supporters, right? Does his death take with it questions and any need for accountability from the IFP as an organization for what happened during that period?
Very contested, and you're putting me on the spot here as someone who comes from KZN and loves that province. I'll tell you, it would be a brave man to decide who the guilty party is. It's certainly, in a war, there's always two sides. We see in the Ukraine war that sometimes you have an aggressor and sometimes you have somebody who's being attacked. Russia is the aggressor, Ukraine is being attacked. In the case of the IFP and the ANC, especially because it was such a long conflict and such a complicated one, I would say that it would be a fool to apportion more blame to the one side than the other. Should there be more accountability from the IFP? probably from all sides, but what form would that take? At what point will the taking of accountability, the expression of regret, which has always been there from the ANC, from the government of the day, the National Party, and from the IFP, that's always been there. Nobody has welcomed that sort of violence. But the question is, at what point will anyone be happy that the other side has now done enough attrition? I think that day is far away, and I don't think that one should ask of the IFP, the ANC, or the then government to, in the end, try to appease everybody. It will be a never-ending process. What we should know is that there should never, ever be such violence in our country again. If that is what we can learn, then the whole blame game falls away.
Jan Jan Joubert, good to speak to you. Thank you so much, journalist and author, speaking to us today about the future of the IFP in a post-Buthelezi era.